We're coming to you from the inner city of Johannesburg, where from the early hours of the morning, emergency services and firefighters have been fighting a blaze at this building, a five-storey building, which saw 73 people losing their lives. We've heard that this is a hijacked building, it was abandoned, and it's unsure yet who exactly was running this building. We know it belonged to the city of Johannesburg. We've spoken to some residents as well as family members who are still searching for their loved ones who are believed to have been in this building earlier on. We spoke to one lady who was still looking for her brother. She said that she was told by a neighbor that he had jumped out of the window and she's had no contact with him. Last was at least 2:48 a.m. when her other brother contacted her to say that they're looking for the brother following this fire that broke out here. The cause of the incident is still under investigation. Emergency services took 2 hours to put out the blaze, and then multiple hours later for just search and rescue going through that 5 stories. From what we know, we've been told that these buildings are empty structures that have been now separated by informal structures, so that also caused some difficulty in finding those that have been trapped under. But I want to bring in yet again another political party that is here, Action SA leader Herman Mashaba. Thank you so much for being here. We're standing here just outside that building. We know that phase 2 of operations are underway. What's the sentiments from you to the families who are still waiting for their loved ones and are still suffering right now?
You know, I obviously need to first of all send my deepest condolences to the victims and their families. And, you know, it's unfortunate that this tragedy was avoidable. Unfortunately, it lacked the political will for this city to be what it is today. What we're seeing here is just a small matter in a big scheme of things. When I was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, I just want to remind South Africans on the 1st of December 2016, during my 100 days as a mayor, I then brought this situation to the residents of Johannesburg and the people broadly of South Africa, that we're sitting with a huge challenge. At the time at the city of Johannesburg, the housing backlog was sitting at just over 300,000. The city at the time attracting plus minus 3,000 people every single month. But at the same time, we had buildings hijacked, abandoned, derelict. And I brought this matter to the attention of the Premier, what my plan was. And on the 1st of December, I brought it to the attention of people of South Africa. For some reason, all of a sudden, I had attacks, being called names, unleashed all manner of insults. But fortunately enough, I'm not the kind of person that's going to be distracted by insults. One thing that we were facing a challenge, our poor people, our students. This city is a city of students where they needed proper accommodation in consultation with the universities. I gave a commitment to the residents of the city of Johannesburg that whether people like it or not, I am going to expropriate these buildings. I am going to find the owners of these buildings. If I can't find them, we will expropriate them. If we find them, we are going to put them on terms to restore these buildings to their original state, so that our people can live in safety. By the time I left in 2019, through council, council had already awarded 154 buildings to the private sector to refurbish those buildings to the tune of 32 billion rands, creating 14,000 accommodation units, creating 22,000 permanent jobs. Unfortunately, the ANC and the DA decided focusing on things that were not a priority in their lives, and obviously planned a motion of no confidence against me. And that's when I unfortunately had to really leave. Sad moment for me. And unfortunately, the buildings which were already awarded to the private sector, approved by council, I can tell you less than 10% of them, nothing has happened ever since. In fact, the situation has gotten even worse.
You bring me to my next question. Sorry, Mr. Shaba. That's 7 years since you brought these proposals in, I remember us sitting through these presentations of how these buildings would be, taken back, how would they be made into viable financial, properties for the city. We're still stuck with those problems. What exactly were the challenges, and why do we still see it, other than just, political will?
Well, I think the challenge at the time was the lack of consequences of criminal elements. Unfortunately, our criminal justice system is actually failing our country, because obviously we had identified the people behind these buildings. Unfortunately, the city of Johannesburg, constitutionally, we don't have the right to prosecute. I'm sure you guys as journalists, you remember on many occasions I used to say to South Africa that a city like Johannesburg, I really wish that one day we can have the right to prosecute, we can have our own prisons, because unfortunately the province and national government are letting us down. The criminal elements are actually having a field day in terms of what's happening in our city. So for as long as the criminal justice system is captured by criminals, unfortunately we're not going to win a war against this. We will have one crisis after the other until such time that this city South Africa becomes a failed state. And we are on a verge. You can imagine 73 people lost their lives. Totally unnecessary. But
how do we keep them safe? How do we keep those that are poorest, the most vulnerable, who find themselves living in these places that don't have running water, that don't have electricity, that seem to be sometimes, barricaded with temporary structures? How do we keep them safe?
Well, look, you need a political will to take over these buildings, because the city, the province and national government, we don't have the necessary funds to refurbish these buildings ourselves. But you've got the private sector that is willing. So what you need to do, you need to make sure that you can have the political will to pass legislation that can allow you to take over these buildings, give them on a transparent tender basis, give them to the private sector to build affordable accommodation to our people. But unfortunately, at national government level, there's no political will. Our criminal justice system is dysfunctional. I remember on numerous occasions when we wanted to carry out these raids, the province will actually to stop SABC from accompanying us, because when you raid a building like this as a city, you need to be accompanied by SABC. But from time to time, the province will actually go to an extent of refusing SABC from accompanying us. We will identify hijackers. We will report them to the works, we'll report them to the prosecuting authority, but nothing will happen. And unfortunately, the city had no legal right to prosecute. And that's why I kept saying the city like this requires to have its own prosecutorial right, must have its own prisons. And I wasn't really joking. This is now the price we're paying.
Thank you so much. That was Action SA's Herman Mashaba, also the former mayor of the city of Johannesburg, speaking to us here following that tragic incident that took place. I want to bring in the gift of the givers. Clifford, you've been here from the morning. Can you tell us what has been the emergent response that was needed by those that have been affected?
For now, we had to come for the firefighters. We had to give them some refreshment, and then until I was waiting for them to hand over the building to disaster management and housing, and then after that, we'll know how many people are affected and where they're going to take them. But at the moment now, our team is on standby, loading the trucks, hygiene packs, clothes, mattresses, blankets, because they lost everything.
Thank you so much. That was Clifford from the gift of the givers speaking to us here, one of the NGOs that have responded to this disaster that took place here. We've seen government from a provincial level as well as the municipal level all being out here responding to this. This incident has highlighted some of the issues that have come out with regards to housing. We know that the city of Johannesburg, that Gauteng, it's a migrant city. It's one that sees internal migration, but also external migration from within South Africa, but also from outside of the borders. And this has caused an issue. We have a backlog of housing within this area, and some of the issues that it does manifest itself in is in the way that housing is then distributed. We have an issue when it comes to the amount of available, affordable and good quality housing that is available for those that need a space to stay in. That's why we find ourselves in buildings such as the one behind us that found itself burning. It is a 5-story building here. We're told that over 300 people resided within here, some foreign nationals, some locals. One of the women that we spoke to earlier said they're from Ladysmith and that her brother was a qualified lawyer who was then living here within this building, he said, from almost 5 to 6 years. Many of those buildings around us are also student housings from various universities that are within this area. This has become, an issue that's really put a spotlight on the issue of abandoned buildings, of hijacked buildings, as well as the issue of criminality that takes place. I want to bring in the DA's Solly Msimang here. Thank you so much for speaking to us. We're here, following this tragic incident. Let's start with what's your response to the family and victims who find themselves, without a space right now, with many of their loved ones either hurt or dead?
Well, first of all, we want to pass our sincerest condolences to the families of the ones that have perished in this fire here. This is a disaster that unfortunately could have been prevented. This is one of the buildings that had been identified, and this belongs, by the way, to the Johannesburg Property Company. And we have been saying for the longest of time, let's do an audit of all these buildings. Let's make sure that we begin the process of cleaning these buildings and not leave people living in dangerous and compromising situations that that now led to the disaster. One of the things that I think we need to be asking is, where is the Human Rights Commission? Because the Human Rights Commission are the ones who will jump, first of all, come up with interdict when you're trying to remove people out of harm's way. Look at where the floods are. Usually, when you try to remove people out of flood lines, they'll be the first one to jump and come up with interdict to then say, you leave people where they are. But when there's a disaster, they're nowhere to be found. Right now, this could have been a situation that could have been avoided. There's a building, 2 buildings behind us here. Same thing is going to happen. There's a building here, 2 more buildings this way, where these disasters are waiting to happen. The question is, are we going to allow a situation where lawlessness becomes the order of the day? Are we going to then start enforcing bylaws? I'm hoping that Panyaza Lesufi will come and talk about how the provincial government will work with the local government to enforce not only bylaws, but to make sure that all the hijacked buildings and the hijacking kingpins are actually then brought to book. And that we cannot continue to have a disaster like what we're having right here, right now. And that the intervention is not only going to be in front of the TVs and in front of the cameras, and once you guys go, they go our way with them. Like what we've seen now in after the disaster, the gas disaster in Ekurhuleni, where they come in front of cameras, make all sorts of promises, and say there's going to be sustained program of ensuring that we're monitoring what the illegal activities are, and then we're going to have police presence and interventions that will be brought in. But yet nothing happens immediately after that. Hopefully this is not going to be one of those situations here again. And those that are, again, most likely sitting in a similar situation and waiting for disaster to happen, we can try and avoid perishing of life going forward.
We've been speaking to various political parties, but also listening to the local government that has been here. One of the things that keep coming up, these issues are identified. We've known of it, within the media, within the government. Why is it taking so long? We spoke with, a former mayor of the city of Joburg, Herman Mashaba. We spoke with Musi Memani earlier as well. These plans have been put into place. There were budgets put into place. What happened? Why are we seeing the stagnation when it comes to it actually being implemented on the ground?
Well, can I tell you, there's no political will. When we were here, when we started saying we are not going to allow people to remain in inhabitable, conditions and in places where disaster can strike, and we wanted to remove people, we were met with populist, responses to then say you can't remove people, or you hate black people, or whatever. Here are black people who died behind us. Where is that government that says we cannot remove people out of harm's way? What are they going to do? And this is the question that, again, they must respond to as a provincial and local government, to then say, first of all, where is our housing list? We've been asking for housing lists to be made public for a very, very long time. People who have been waiting for their houses since 1994, who get frustrated and say, we are not able to then get our houses. Whatever space that is available, we are going to grab. That's number one. Number two, people leave their hometowns to come into the Joburg CBD because they are looking for an economic way or economic means. Part of why people will leave their homes somewhere where there is comfort to come and put themselves in danger like this because they need to provide for themselves and their families. What is the economic plan that we have for the people of Johannesburg and for the people of Gauteng at large? Because that begins to then address some of these challenges. How do we decentralize the economy? That this economy is not only centralized around the CBDs and all of that, that people can find work wherever they would be. There is no plan. And this is something that we have been saying for a very, very long time. Can we get a plan? This is a heritage building that has been destroyed here. Part of history, this is where, it might not be a good part of history, but it is part of history. This is where the dome passes used to be processed, by the way. But that is gone. We haven't been able to then cater and take care of our infrastructure. And this is why criminal elements will find it easy to then jump in and grab and hijack this kind of buildings.
And you bring me right to my next point, which is on the criminality and the issues around criminality is that it's identified that there are syndicates that hijack these buildings, that then lease it out. Why are we not fighting that level of criminality at the top? Why are we not ensuring that those that rent out these buildings are brought to book?
Well, that's a good question, and this is why we have been saying you start removing people from there, and then you will see who are the responsible people coming out because their income is then disturbed. But if you then leave that and then don't do anything, you're not going to get to the answers. And this is why we have been saying for the longest of time, start removing people from where they find themselves in, avoid the disaster. You will see the kingpins coming out because their income is then being disturbed. And if that is the case, then you will be able to then go after the kingpins. And this is something that unfortunately hasn't been done for the longest of time.
Thank you so much. That was DA leader Solly Msimang.